Good Monday night, Facebook friends. This is Granny, November the 15th, 2021. Can you believe this? This is Granny. Uh, don't have a lot of bling bling on tonight. This next chapter deals with me and my grandkids entering into a battle, and I'm happy to say that we win. Um, we're going to have to do chapter 4 in 2 sessions, and I'm telling you ahead of time because it is long. And I apologize for that, but my goodness, you'll look at how amazing and resilient my grandchildren are because they shared in this. I call it a combat that we had to enter. Like to give a shout out. I have a fan club. My niece, Becky Scott. When we first started this, Becky was the first one that responded. And I'm calling her name because I said I would give her kudos. She never fails to watch, compliment me, um, uh, give me good sound advice. Last week she told me to stop apologizing when I say I'm trying not to bring the church into it. She said, Auntie, that's who you are. So, Becky Scott, I thank you for that. Let me tell you guys who I have on my team. I have a social media manager who just happens to be one of my grandchildren, and I also have a publicity manager who happens to be one of my grandchildren, and we're working on a manager, somebody that can help me tighten up some things. With all of that said, um, I'm so happy to be here. And I have my comeback stuff on because when you get to the end of this chapter, you'll see why USA. This chapter took place in the United States of America in Memphis, Tennessee. So, with that said, remember we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter and Instagram. And so we are, I gotta say it, Becky, eternally grateful for all of you that are still following me. With that said, we're gonna start reading. I'm gonna try my best to look in the camera as much as I can. This is a long chapter, and I want you to be able to enjoy the fruits of it because, grannies, I think if you are in a position to tell somebody your story, you will do what I had to do. And it's entitled, The Lights Really Do Go Out, My Knee Baby. Okay, here we go. My mom was a wonderful human being who had a way with words when she needed to get her point across with her children. She always told us not to say what we wouldn't and would do in this life. Sometimes she would say things happen and that we would find ourselves doing some expected things where our character and integrity would be tested. She informed us that once we became adults and had our own children, much like she had done so many times for us, sacrifices would be made and our love for our own children would be tested. Well, into my adult life, I can say my mom was right. There were some things I experienced as a child living with my mom that I swore I would never do, including but not limited to eating the government cheese, the oatmeal, the powdered eggs, the powdered milk, the spam, and that potted meat mixed with dark, overcooked brown gravy. I'm going to take a break. Some of you may not remember that, but we got government surplus food, and it was awful. And to this day, I will not eat oatmeal. I will not eat spam because it reminds me of that meat that was in the can and that brown gravy that was mixed with that beef. I promise God, and so far, I haven't lied to God. I swore never again to sleep in a house whose running water, heat, or lights had been shut off. Well, guess what? Several years ago, I lied, and at 53, I heard my mom's voice loud and clear. It took a long time for it to happen, but it did. Since my mom's advice many years ago, I have slept on floors, chairs, back seats of small automobiles, coal buses, airplanes, trains, and beds with no mattresses. I even slept with my three sisters in the same bed. What I am about to share with you is the truth, the whole truth. So help me God. I have already closed the door of shame that tried so hard to destroy my life early on. So please don't feel sorry for what I'm about to share. I call it taking advantage of another opportunity to see my survival skills in action. I have been fortunate enough to birth three wonderful children of my own, and I also have two stepchildren who I love dearly. All of them have been on my heart as infants and now until adulthoods. I call what I have a knee baby. Most of the older folks, I'm taking a break, know what a knee baby is. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you what my knee baby is. When I was a child, the old people down south used to say that your children are on your heart when they're small. When they become adults, you will find yourself on your knees praying to God on their behalf. Now, for the lack of better terminology, I really do have a knee baby. I know I've spent many hours on my knees where she's concerned, not for behavior problems, but for the sicknesses that invaded her frail body each and every time. She was about to reach some major goal in her life. I've practiced tough love with her, emotional love, sound love, foolish love, and this journey, we're going to go to page 16 for those of you that have the book. And this journey I'm about to share with you encompasses unconditional love in its highest form from a parent when a child or when a child or your children are concerned. In 2002, I literally went up and down Interstate 55 South 8 times to Memphis, Tennessee, visiting my hospitalized child. I traveled by car when time allowed, flew on airplanes when money was available, and I spent many a trip on a good old Greyhound bus. I remember the last time I had to go, my daughter had already been admitted to the hospital when I received the call. I decided this was to be the last time I would go. My grandchildren would have to return back to me, and when my daughter was strong enough, she would return back to move home. My husband was working the second shift at his job, and he was well aware of what had transpired. He knew how worn and tired my physical body had become, and he watched and heard my cries as I had to come to terms with another 18-hour bus ride. I had no choice but to leave my job that day earlier than usual. I picked a few things and left Lansing, Michigan. I boarded the 7:25 bus with a foot-long submarine sandwich and a large white styrofoam 16-ounce cup of ice that were held captive in a plastic bag. This is a true story. I'm taking a break. This actually happened. As I'm going to say it, Becky, as God is my witness. These two items were to last me the duration of the trip. The sandwich had been cut into fours, and at each major stop, I replenished the cup of ice. My nephew, and I'm going to call his name Antonio Scott, was kind enough to drop me off and provide me with this sandwich. I had to change buses in Chicago, which is always a treat. I believe people come from all over the world just to change buses there. Single moms, fathers, dads, young and old. The line for Memphis is always long, no matter how early you arrive. You see bags tied with ropes and belts, plastic bags containing food, and people hoping for the best seat as they make the connection. I made eye contact and smiled at a few people in line. I thought it was important for them to know what I looked like in case something happened on the bus. September 11th did change our world, but the love of a mother with a child in trouble supersedes any fears that attempt to invade her consciousness. It was like I switched gears, and during the time of trouble, the love I had for my child sustained me. Even though those other people in line couldn't imagine what I was experiencing. At least I thought someone would remember. I smiled. And I did do this. I smiled. I smiled. And I'm saying this, Granny, for a reason. I was en route, had no idea what I would find on the other end, but I still smiled, knowing that even though my daughter was in the hospital, I still smiled because I wanted somebody to say, "We remember that lady." They didn't know that I was replenishing the cup of ice, the styrofoam cup. They didn't know my Subway sandwich had been cut in fours, and because I didn't have a lot of money, that was going to last me the duration of the trip. It never ceases to amaze me that while standing in those long lines, how often I wonder about stories they could share with me about themselves while they stood in those lines. I wonder what pain they had carried around. Were some of them en route to rescue a loved one, or were they headed for a new life? The food court in Chicago is expensive. I was able to have a person watch my belongings while I got another styrofoam cup filled with ice. Once permitted to board the bus, I managed to get the back seat. It was made a nice place to where I could stretch my tired body and prepare for the long ride. I received word before leaving lesson that my daughter was able to have a young girl sit in for my grandkids. I'm on page 18 prior to my arrival, and that she would have to leave in order to get ready for school the next day morning. I'm 18 hours away and frustrated, but determined to make the best of the trip once again. My grandchildren had to be placed with another person, as she also had to get ready for school the next morning. I arrived in Memphis the next morning around 11 a.m. and was met by one of my daughter's friends who had been kind enough to get the children off to school. I went straight to the hospital, washed my face in my daughter's room, and introduced myself to the nursing staff. I made sure they knew I was in from out of town. I didn't want them thinking no one cared about my daughter. She had spent crucial hours there without any family members. They needed to know she was loved and cared for. I spoke with her doctors only to be informed of the paralysis the stroke had caused and another condition that invaded her small body. By mid afternoon, I had already picked up my daughter's automobile from the hospital parking lot for where she left it upon her arrival. I had learned how to get back and forth to the hospital. Hospital. I picked up my grandchildren from school, met the principal, their teachers, and headed back to the hospital for a third time in the same day. I managed to get all of us back to my daughter's apartment safely, passing Krispy Kreme's donut shop located on Elvis Presley Boulevard along the way. What a treat to actually drive down these famous streets hours after standing in a line at the Greyhound bus station. Isn't life one big barrel of laughs? Everyone had his or her bath, and I was really feeling like I had accomplished something good that night. Prayers were said, the grands spoke with their mom briefly on the phone, and off to bed we all went. The next day for me arrived somewhat earlier than I was used to, but so what? I'm a granny with old hands and ready to be successful to meet the goals for the day. I dropped the kids off at school, picked them up from school, visited the hospital. We did homework. We spoke with the doctors. My daughter's gallbladder would have to be removed in the next couple of days because her blood pressure indicated she had had another stroke. I don't know to this day how the stroke and gallbladder are related, but they did remove it on the second day of my visit. The third day arrived, as did the bright brilliance of the sun in the sky. I hanged around just long enough for me to enjoy the beauty of God and His creation. It was the same routine, except we had treats on the way home. Can you guess where we went? Straight to Krispy Kreme. Once again, I must relate that this is in fact a true account of 9 days spent on a journey reevaluating my love for my knee baby who lay in the hospital at the mercy of God, doctors, nurses, and many laboratory technicians. The next day arrived, but with it came a trial that would change my life once again. I had dropped the older two children off at school, and the baby and I stayed back at the apartment. We were singing along with Barney on TV and had just finished saying our morning prayers, agreeing that Barney would fill in when we prepared to go back I'm on page 20. To the hospital when a silence fell upon the house. The sound was interrupted on the TV. My first thoughts was that the signal had been lost, but not so. The silence I was experiencing was the electricity being shut off. I managed to get up and get to the back door just in time to see the person from the local Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Company disconnecting my daughter's services. I quickly tried to explain what was going on in my daughter's life, and I was just visiting to help out. I even opened the door wide enough so she could see my small grandchild lived here. I was informed of what it would cost to have services restored and was even provided the necessary phone numbers to call assistance. I was given 5 days, grannies, 5 days to take care of the bill or the other service would be interrupted. I thanked the lady and returned to the living room. I literally dropped to my knees, and as God is my witness, I lifted up my arms and began to sing. My precious grandchild did the same thing. While on my knees, I discovered I could still function in the midst of this heavy trial. I had just enough money available to rent a U-Haul truck to relocate my daughter's belongings and my grandchildren back to Lansing. I phoned my husband and informed him of what had taken place. He provided the best advice he could, considering the fact that my finances and what I was working with. I dressed my grandchild and myself and decided the best thing I could do was make a trip to one of the local discount stores I had seen on my way to the hospital. But take a break. What I'm going to say is the God heaven knows truth. I purchased some battery operated lights, a small 5-inch TV, and a radio. I picked up from school the other kids and informed them that we would be playing an adventurous game when they got home. We went to the hospital, visited my daughter, and left just before the street lights caught us. Things were going well until the fifth day. Memphis Light, Gas, and Water did return, this time to shut off the water and gas. I'm going to stop right there, grannies, because I don't want to go over the time that I usually go over. But thus far, what I have shared with you, Granny, is the truth. And the reason I call my baby my knee baby is different things that occurred in her life taught me how to really get on my knees and seek God. And I know you're saying, what does this do with you coming out of the closet? What does this do with you dressed like you in the service? For 9 days, 10 days, I was in the service in Memphis. Not in the regular military, but I was trying to finagle how I could keep protective service from coming in my daughter's house. When they turned off the water, I knew we couldn't stay there. The lights, it was okay because we had made a tent on the floor. We pretended we were, on an expedition, and the kids were fine. Um, we would get them off to school, come back, we go to the hospital, we would see my daughter, but we'd always return to her home before it got dark because I didn't want the neighbors to see us coming into a dark house. With that said, grannies, I know that we can survive any and everything. Most of you have a knee baby. You may not call her or him a knee baby, but I call him my knee baby because during her illness, it taught me how to seek the Lord. It taught me how to forget about everything else that was going on and concentrate on God. How are we going to do this? How are we going to make this work? And as we'll start again next week, I'll tell you what it was like having the water shut off. What do you do, Granny? What do you do? Do you take the money you got and get the services cut back on? Or do you decide we're going to make this work until other things can take place? And other things did take place. So Granny is hoping you will join her next week and we will finish this. And I say it every time we meet. Grannies, raise your hands. Raise your hands, Granny. If you're dealing with a knee baby, maybe you have two knee babies. I don't know. But I had to find a way to turn my skills So number one, my grandkids wouldn't feel they already had to deal with their mom being gone. But I didn't want them to think that, Granny, what are we going to do? We had so much fun. I still have the little bitty TV. If you look, the cabinet that's up above our our picture, I kept it, and I've kept it all these years. And the little radio, and the flashlights. And you say, why would you keep it? As a reminder of what we had to do. When I say we, me and the grandkids, during that stay in Memphis, Tennessee. Let me say this: the sandwich, I was able to sustain the sandwich until I got to Memphis. I was able to change the styrofoam cup and get ice the duration of the trip. So don't think, grannies, something as small as that I survived on till I got to Memphis. This is Granny. Yay! Yay! USA. See, USA. This took place in Memphis, Tennessee, in the United States of America. And I wore my combat shirt so you can see, Granny. Sometimes you got to put that combat shirt on. Sometimes you got to get in there and fight. And sometimes you got to tell yourself, it ain't over till I sing. And even if you can't sing, it ain't over till I holler or scream. This is Celestine Stark saying, it's always a pleasure to come before you. I appreciate your support, and we'll look for you next Monday night. It's getting closer to Thanksgiving, and I know we all have something to be thankful for. I'm so thankful that you've joined me, and this is Granny saying, raise your hands, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.